Welcome to Giants Latest, the place to get all of your New York Giants news. To make sure you hit the subscribe button. Let's get right into it and talk about OTAs because they are officially complete. And at the end of the episode, we're going to talk about what's coming up next and what we'll be talking about during that dead zone from minicamp until training camp. So, in the meantime, let's talk about OTAs now because they're officially done. And I think there are some valuable insights that came out of it. So, the first thing that I heard across the board is that everyone seems to love Russell Wilson. And before you all comment that, well, they're not going to say anything negative about their quarterback, I understand that. I know that. But the way that the players seem to be gushing about him, Darius Slayton talked about how his leadership skills are so important and how, he's really focused and he knows every single player on this team, whether you're, the fourth string offensive lineman or you're Malik Neighbors. He knows everyone. He makes it a point to go out of his way to talk to everyone and get to know them. Wan'Dale Robinson talked about the fact that he throws a really nice ball and it's like catching a pillow, and he feels like he's really going to be utilized more in this offense this year and he can't wait to get going. Everyone has spoken overly positively about Russell Wilson, but it's not just about Russell Wilson. It's been about the quarterback room as a whole. Darius Slayton is joking around about Jameis Winston, about how they go from talking about a slant to talking about fried chicken, and then 1 second later they're back involved in the OTAs talking about the slants. And he's like, I just can't wrap my head around how we went from one thing to the next. But in the same breath, he's talking about that he loves being in the same room as Jameis Winston and that he offers so much and he has so much experience in the league. And, he has a really unique balance of being focused on practices and invested, but also being light and keeping the energy going, and this is stuff that we've never heard about Giants quarterbacks. I know we all love Eli Manning. I'm like his number one fan, but we didn't ever hear that coming out of practices and things like that. And I know it's a different world now. It's 20 years later and whatever, but I just think that goes to show a lot about the fact that this quarterback room is significantly different than last year. And ultimately, it doesn't matter unless they play well on the field, but I feel optimistic that we're headed in the right direction, especially from the quarterback room. All of those guys also talked about how much they love Jackson Dart and how he brings such a different energy. And, Slayton talked about how much he's already seen him progress so much. And Daboll talked about, his feistiness and his competitiveness. And Wan'Dale's also saying that, we're the ones who are telling him, you got to learn how to slide. You can't be diving. And, we want you up here to live to see another down. So it just feels like there's a different camaraderie and a different energy. And that's been something that the players have all conveyed. So I think that's important coming out of the OTAs. It's the first time the whole team is really together. And it's not just the 53 players who are going to make this team, right? It's all of the UDFAs, some of the free agent signings, and all the other guys who have been involved in the team right now. And, obviously we'll see what happens with them. But I just think it's been really interesting that has been a very common theme. And, we've joked around, and I have talked about this with other people too, is that, Daboll, in little clips that I've seen from the media of him at practice, looks like a pig in shit. Like, he looks like he's having the time of his life. He's finally got his own quarterback, right? He's got a quarterback who's not going to be afraid to throw the deep ball. He's got Jameis Winston, who also is not going to be afraid to throw the ball down the field. So I think there's a renewed sense of energy, and the players talked about that everyone is bought in. And that's the first step, right? We don't want to be the Bengals. I don't want to hear day in and day out that our front office is ruining our team by throwing players under the bus, by not giving them contracts that they deserve. Like, if the Giants ever did that with Dexter Lawrence, we'd all be up in arms, and that's all we would be talking about. So, I think it's important to just highlight these things, while maybe in the grand scheme of things, they don't seem that important. When you look at what's going on with the Giants versus the Bengals, I think it's fair to talk about it briefly. And I honestly feel bad for Bengals fans because I'm like, the front office is going to ruin your team this year, which is really upsetting because they have two really good players that should be out there, should be getting to know all of the other players involved in OTAs and knowing Joe Burrow and other defensive players and this and that. And, they're just not able to do it because their front office sucks. So that is unfortunate for them. Anyway, let's talk about some highlights from OTAs. So I think one of the things that I think is most important is the defense. Like, we're all just so excited about the defense, and I think it's fair. And the number one reason that I've seen is the fact that our front four is getting to the quarterback in less than 2 seconds, which is insane. I know there's no pads. I know there's no tackling. I know there's no one-on-ones, and I know there's no battles. I understand all of that. But the biggest common theme from this front four is that there's speed and agility there. And we didn't see this at this time last year. Yes, we were optimistic about the defense. Yes, we were optimistic about Burns and Kayvon, but we have Abdul Carter and Dexter Lawrence, and now you have Chauncey Golston, who also would have recorded a couple sacks throughout these OTAs if they were real practices. So, when you hear things like that and you hear about the fact that Dane Belton is a turnover superstar who has multiple interceptions throughout 10 OTAs, we need to see it translate. But these are the things that are all good that we should be talking about, right? It should be giving us hope and optimism that this defense really is going to be top 5, top 10 in the NFL. So those are some really good things about the defense. Everything that I'm hearing about Tay Banks, whether it's from the coaching staff, which of course they're only going to say good things, or about other players, is that he is locked in this year, that he has been making plays, that he has had some pass breakups, that he's asking questions in meetings, that he's really involved with Shane Bowen. This is the stuff that I want to hear, especially from someone who's coming off a down year. Cordell Flott is having a really nice OTAs. Let's see if that translates throughout camp. He's had quite a few pass breakups. He's been getting reps with the ones, and overall has seemed to bounce back again, which is important. So consistency is also important. Let's see how they keep that up. Paulson Adebo has done a nice job. Javon Holland. These guys have all really gotten involved and have made differences so far in OTAs. So I'm happy to hear that they all seem to be recording different types of plays and are making their names known on the field. Very important, especially, for a guy like Cordell Flott, who, if the Giants cut him, they can save a few $1 million. And it might be a good idea, but it might be at this point, it's probably not a good idea. First of all, because we need the depth, but also second of all, because he's proving to everyone that he is worth that roster spot. And again, let's see how that develops. But, Flott has been hit or miss. So I feel like if he can really focus on that consistency, it's going to make a big difference for him. And then the last thing for this defense that I'm excited about is that it feels like we really have some depth there for the first time in a long time, which is one of the reasons why I don't want Flott going anywhere. All right, let's move along to the offense, because there also have been some good things that have come out of there. And the biggest thing is that we have Russ Wilson. And look, I know that so many people are like, it's not the Russ Wilson who won a Super Bowl. I just want you to remember something, okay? If you have been watching Giants football for 5 years, okay, this is what you have seen. Daniel Jones throw pick sixes, take sacks he's not supposed to take, throw the most awful interceptions you've ever seen in your life, and go running only to be tackled before, or trip on his own 2 feet before he makes it to the end zone, okay? Not only that, Mike Glennon did a quarterback sneak on their own 10-yard line when it was 3rd and 8. Tommy DeVito, his first time in a Giants game, was not allowed to throw the ball. Drew Lock had one good game out of how many? One good game against the Colts, who basically gave up and didn't do anything that game. Okay, we have been watching the most awful display of quarterbacks for the last 5 years. So I don't want to hear people complain that Russ Wilson is not very good, because he is light years better than what we have dealt with for the last 5 years. And every single year, we have had to not only deal with Daniel Jones, who's been very hit or miss and inconsistent, we also have had to play multiple quarterbacks who have not been very good. So at least Russell Wilson is going to be consistent. He can run an offense. He can read a defense. He can throw a deep ball. Not only that, he's also gotten every single wide receiver involved. Darius Slayton said that he is 99% sure that Russell Wilson has thrown a deep ball to every single wide receiver pretty much on this roster, at least all of the starters, outside of Malik Neighbors, only because he hasn't been playing because he's coming back from the turf toe. And on top of that, he also said that there's only been 1 or 2 that Russell has missed on. I know no one's coming at his face. I know he's not getting attacked by defensive linemen, but still, let us be optimistic while we can, okay? Because if they start out 0-1, it's going to get ugly around here real fast. So let's talk about the good things while we can enjoy them, okay? But I think there are things to be optimistic about. How about this? Jackson Dart has worked his way into getting a lot of reps with the twos. So while we're going into it thinking Jackson Dart is going to get all the reps with the threes and DeVito's four and Winston is two, Jackson Dart is maybe proving to everyone that he deserves to get more reps with the twos. Now, we also know that Brian Dable has good experience with rotating the quarterbacks, that they get a bunch of different reps here and there, as with the ones, with the twos, with the threes. He is really gaining a good rapport with all of the players. The tight ends are getting heavily involved. How many of us have been complaining that we want to see more Daniel Bellinger, we want to see more Theo Johnson, both of which who have caught touchdowns throughout OTAs so far. Chris Manhertz has also been involved. So has Greg Dulcich and Thomas Fidone. So there are reasons to be optimistic about this team. You know, Tyrone Tracy talked about what he's doing to improve and focus. He bought one of those hand grips off of Amazon. And he said he does it every single night because it's really important to him that he fixes his turnover issue that he dealt with last year. So you've got players who are invested, who care, who want to be better, who are focused on building a competitive team that has one goal in mind, and that's to win football games. So, you know, I think there are definitely things to be optimistic about, and I think we've seen some good things coming out of OTAs. So, you know, I'm optimistic about Russ Wilson. I don't have the expectation that he's going to be Tom Brady out there, but I do think that he's going to be a lot better than what we have seen over the last couple of years. And think about how much more talent we have on this team. You know, Russ also didn't have a ton of talent in some of the teams that he was playing on towards the end of his career. So I think that, you know, a lot of players feel re-energized by the fact that they have a new quarterback, that they're the second year in this defensive scheme, that they have Abdul Carter, that they brought in some good talent. The offensive line is consistent for the first time in God knows how long. We have the same starting offensive lineman this year than we did last year. It's probably been 8 or 9 years, maybe even 10 years since that has happened. So, you know, I just think there are good things that are come out of OTAs, and let's talk about them now while we can, because from OTAs, now that that is done, the players have a couple days off, and then they have mini camp, and then there is pretty much a 4-week break before training camp starts in July. So here's the deal with training camp. It starts Wednesday, July 23rd. It usually runs for about 2 weeks. Anywhere from 9 to 10 practices will be open to the public. The tickets are free, but you must get tickets prior if you would like to go. And it's an opportunity for all of us to get to see these guys in person, to see Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart. You know, I love training camp. I'm really excited about it. And then while we have that 4-week break, if there's anything that you guys want to hear about in the comments, please let me know, because we will not have any live football to discuss. So I think we'll talk a little bit about the history of the organization, some of the players that should be talked about, players who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame that are not. We can talk about the upcoming season, some expectations, bold predictions, things like that. But if there's anything else that you want to see, or players specifically that you want to hear talked about, please let me know in the comments. I am open to all of your suggestions, and I can't wait to talk more Giants football with you.